Ever puzzled over why February only has 28 days, or 29 if we're in a leap year? This question has intrigued many, sparking theories that range from the whimsical to the scientific. But the answer isn't hidden in the changing seasons or the weather patterns. Instead, it's etched in the annals of time, embedded in the evolution of our calendar systems. The tale of February's short duration is a fascinating journey that takes us back to the era of the ancient Romans. Back then, the calendar looked quite different from what we're familiar with today. In fact, the Romans believed the year had only 10 months, starting with March. February was the last month of the year and had just 28 days. But as time passed and civilizations advanced, changes were made to the calendar system. One of the most significant was brought about by none other than Julius Caesar. In 46 BC, Caesar introduced a new calendar system known today as the Julian Calendar. This calendar recognized the year as having 365 days, and an extra day was added to February. But the story doesn't end there. The time it takes for the Earth to orbit the Sun isn't exactly 365 days. It's approximately 365.2422 days. This discrepancy accumulates over time, reaching an extra day every 4 years. To correct this, an extra day is added to February every 4 years, creating what we know as a leap year. In the 16th century, Pope Gregory XIII introduced another calendar system, the Gregorian Calendar, which continued the practice of leap years, but with some modifications to further refine the calculation of time. So the mystery of February's 28 or 29 days is rooted in the evolution of historical calendar systems. From being the last month of the year in the ancient Roman calendar to gaining an extra day in the Julian calendar and leap years, February's journey is a fascinating one. So let's dive into the annals of time, starting with the calendar of the ancient Romans. The ancient Romans, unlike us, believed a year consisted of only 10 months, starting from March. Now imagine that. The idea of starting the year in the middle of winter might seem odd to us, but to the Romans it was perfectly logical. Their calendar, known as the Roman calendar, was closely linked to the agricultural cycles. Spring, which begins in March, was seen as a time of rebirth and growth, a fitting start to the year. But let's talk about February. The Romans considered February the last month of the year. It was a time of purification and atonement, hence the name February, derived from the Latin term februum, meaning purification. This month was different from the rest, not just in its spiritual significance, but also in the number of days it had. February was the runt of the litter, having only 28 days. So why did February end up with fewer days? Well, the Roman calendar was a lunar calendar based on the phases of the moon. A lunar month is roughly 29.5 days. To keep the calendar in sync with the lunar cycle, the Romans alternated between 30-day months and 31-day months. But they also wanted to keep the total number of days in a year to an even number, which they considered lucky. So to reach an even 360, they needed 1 month to be shorter. February drew the short straw, ending up with only 28 days. But here's the thing about calendars, they aren't static. They evolve with societies, reflecting changes in scientific understanding, political power, and cultural practices. And when it comes to the Roman calendar, it was no different. It had its fair share of changes, tweaks, and overhauls. But as we know, calendars aren't set in stone. Enter Julius Caesar and his calendar reform. In 46 BC, Julius Caesar introduced a new calendar system known as the Julian Calendar. The Julian calendar was a significant leap forward, no pun intended, from the ancient Roman calendar system. Caesar, with the help of an Alexandrian astronomer named Sigenes, decided to tackle the inaccuracies of the old Roman calendar. The Julian calendar acknowledged a year as 365 days, which was closer to the actual solar year than the old Roman calendar's 10-month system. This new calendar also introduced an extra day to February every 4 years, a concept we now know as the leap year. This extra day wasn't merely tacked on to the end of February. Instead, it was taken from August 23rd and placed on February 24th. Why February 24th, you might ask? Well, this has to do with a Roman tradition. The Romans used a system called inclusive counting, which meant that they started counting from the beginning of a sequence, not from zero. So, according to their system, the day after the Ides of February, which was February 13th, was considered the first day towards the next month, making February 24th the leap day. But even Caesar's calendar wasn't perfect. The Earth's orbit around the Sun is not exactly 365 days. In fact, it's about 365 and a quarter days. This discrepancy might seem trivial, but over hundreds of years, it can add up and throw the calendar off by several days. This led to further refinements and the concept of the leap year, which we'll explore in the next scene. Thus, Caesar's calendar reform was a significant step towards the accurate tracking of time, and it's the reason why, in most years, February has 28 days, but every 4 years it has 29. But even Caesar's calendar wasn't perfect. The Earth's orbit around the Sun is not exactly 365 days, leading to the concept of the leap year. Opening. The Earth takes 365.2422 days to orbit the Sun, not a neat 365. This slight discrepancy may not seem like much, but it begins to add up. Imagine for a moment that you're saving a quarter of a penny every day. It might not seem like a lot at first, but over the course of 4 years, you'd have saved up an extra penny. Now, let's apply that logic to our calendar system. If we didn't account for that extra 0.2422 of a day, we'd be off by nearly a full day every 4 years. That's where the idea of a leap year comes in. The term leap year springs from the fact that while a fixed date advances 1 day of the week from 1 year to the next, it leaps 2 in a leap year. The extra day, added to the shortest month, February, makes it a 29-day month every 4 years. This extra day, known as a leap day, helps synchronize our calendar year with the solar year, or the length of time it takes Earth to complete its orbit around the Sun. Now, you might be thinking, that's all well and good, but why February? Well, remember Julius Caesar's calendar reform? February was the last month of the year in the Julian calendar, and it was the logical place to add an extra day. The leap year system was a clever solution to a complex problem. It helped keep our calendar in alignment with Earth's revolutions around the Sun. However, it wasn't perfect. The system overcorrected the discrepancy by adding a leap day every 4 years, making the average year 365.25 days long, which is a bit too much. Leap years were a clever solution, but the calendar was set for another overhaul in the 16th century with the introduction of the Gregorian Calendar. In the 16th century, Pope Gregory XIII introduced a new calendar system, the Gregorian Calendar. Continuing the practice of leap years from its Julian predecessor, the Gregorian calendar brought with it some modifications to further fine-tune our measurement of time. While the Julian calendar added a leap day every 4 years, the Gregorian calendar added a little twist. It stipulated that although most years divisible by 4 would be leap years, those divisible by 100 would not, unless they were also divisible by 400. This twist reduced the number of leap years, bringing the calendar year even closer to the solar year with an average length of about 365.2425 days. This fine-tuning ensures that our seasons remain consistent over the centuries. And so, we arrive at our modern calendar, with its quirky February of 28, or sometimes 29 days. So, we've journeyed through time, from the Romans to the present day, to uncover the mystery of February's 28 days. We've discovered that the short duration of February actually has its roots in ancient Roman times, where the year began in March, making February the last month with only 28 days. Then came Julius Caesar's calendar reform in 46 BC, introducing the Julian calendar and adding an extra day to February. This extra day was plucked from August 23rd and placed into February 24th. We further understood the concept of a leap year, which corrects the fractional extra time it takes for Earth to orbit the Sun by adding an extra day to February every 4 years. Finally, we touched upon the Gregorian calendar, introduced by Pope Gregory XIII, which continued the leap year tradition but with minor adjustments to further fine-tune our timekeeping. And that's the story of February's 28 days, a tale written in the pages of calendars from centuries past. Fascinating, isn't it?